Good meridian. How is everyone doing today? Whether it is AM or PM for you, hope you're doing well. What we're going to look at today, and actually all of this week, next week at least, is trying to use ChatGPT and GPT-4 and maybe oftentimes 3.5 or whatever new versions come out, however long this takes. We're going to be using ChatGPT and AI skills, also in the art department, for generating some of our game art. We're going to be trying to use as much AI as possible to create an entire Web3 blockchain-based MMORPG. And we're going to see how far we can get, calling this Timumahu, tiny multiplayer maze hunt game. And already spent about, say, 4 days on it. And still have not gotten to the point where it is quite playable yet, but we're just right on the verge. We click play the game right now. Going to see that we are connected to MetaMask. And get disconnected here real quick. And let's see how far we've gotten. Connect. And we've got a button here that will allow us to reconnect. And our map is going to be in this box right here. To be able to use the arrow keys to move around. Actually, I think I'm going to use the numpad to move around. So we have directional movement with keys like the 7 and the 9, and the 1 and the 3 will move us in those diagonal directions. But we should be able to connect with MetaMask. Pop up a window over here. Got my Umumahu account. So not sure I really trust security with it a lot at the moment. And so we've got this wallet address. Starts with 5EC, and we can get connected. So once we're connected, what we really want to do, again, just basics, we want to be able to move around a map. And at least for now, we're going to start really, really basic. I want a map where we're going to move around and pick up gold. And hopefully it's multiplayer, multiple people jumping in all at the same time. I'm using Python for the backend server, JavaScript front end, and let's see a little bit about pull this over here for just a second. I've got a map. Not that. Let's see. I have, landing zone is what I've called it. At landing. So one of the other features about this, I want to be able to specify a map in a text-based notation, at least for right now. Y'all are familiar with NetHack, rogue type games. I'm not sure that it's going to be very similar to that necessarily, but I've played a lot of those games in the past. So I want to be able to specify a text-based map like this, where we've got the walls, we've got open floor space, we've got places of gold that people can go around and pick up. All the players are gonna start in a random spot. Didn't say that. They're all gonna start in this very specific spot upon creation of your account. And then the idea is gonna be to go and pick up gold, at least that's the first attempt. Later on, we're going to be able to expand the maps, have people spread out. One of the main goals that I want to do with this is have the players be able to expand the world, maybe based on kind of tier rating or something. So those players that have maybe certain skills, higher tier rankings, will have more power to expand the map and build onto it. That's way down the line. That's something that I've thought about in games for a long time. Right now, we just want to be able to load in a map, walk around it, pick up the gold in a multiplayer fashion. That's basic idea. If you want to see the code just real quick, the first video that I'm doing about this, I've got a couple of different versions. 001 is pretty much first version that ran somewhat successfully in that it had very little or no errors and would actually run. And now I'm on version 2 right now, and I don't have all the details for version 1, but for right now, version 2, I'm adding some different functions, checking for player existence. We're creating a player from the login, and then we've got another function here that's going to just write things to log files so we can keep track of stuff. So we can see that our doing this in Python, being in a bunch of stuff at the beginning, creating a log file where we can have access to just keeping up with what's going on in the game. We want to be using Socket.io for real-time traffic for communication between the clients and the servers. So we're setting that up. We're also trying to use SSL. Figured why not make it here if we can, if it's easy enough. A little bit of game configuration here, trying out some logging, and got a function here to check if the player exists in the database. If the player does or doesn't exist in the database, then we're going to return either a true or false. Got a function here to create the player in the database if it doesn't exist. So have some default values set for the player. Player does not exist in the database. Put that into the database and then be able to return a true value if we were able to succeed with that. You have a login function, which is one of the last things that I did before falling asleep last night. Login function should be what we get directly from connecting with MetaMask. And it's going to first check to see if the player exists. It's going to create the player, and could also be querying the database, reading in data as far as what map player is in, like what region the player is currently in, and the X and Y position, and then other stats like how much gold they're carrying and so on. We want to read in that information from the database and then send that information to the client, which will end up rendering that for them. A function to load the map here. So again, connect to the database. Need to get the map tiles. We need to kind of formulate map tiles that we got from the database into an XY grid. Client can then start to work on and use. Got some player position. So some of this stuff, these might be leftover functions from my version 0.0.1, where I just gave it very basic a ChatGPT prompt, and it created a couple of very simple functions here. It player position, which of course you see it doesn't really do anything. It gold positions doesn't really do anything. It's just telling us what it's going to do. Get the player ID or assign the player ID, initialize the game. We had some very simple starting instructions that probably don't matter anymore. We can probably delete those functions, but see very early in the game. building it. So another interesting thing about this is, since I don't have a full idea of an end game or all the aspects, I'm kind of creating it in my mind also as we're going along. So I've got a lot of pretty basic ideas already from games like this that I've created in the past and games that I've played. I'm going to be basing it a lot on things that kind of already have an idea for. But I'm finding, as I'm going through ChatGPT, sometimes ChatGPT will say something or bring something up that I hadn't thought of before, or maybe I thought was a different or interesting way to do something. So I've kind of gotten redirected into maybe some new or different features. I want to allow myself to explore those. So because of that, I don't really know exactly everything that the game is going to end up with. Like I said, my goal is to get ChatGPT to do as much as possible. Um, I'm going to try to pretend that I'm a non-programmer as much as possible. In fact, uh, not to boast myself too much, it has been a long time since I've done any serious level of programming in general, and I don't think I've ever really programmed in Python. So, to a lot of the extent, some of the code itself is stuff that I wouldn't know how to write off the top of my head anyway. Although I do have many years of programming experience in general, I can generally look at something and see what could potentially be going wrong in a certain bit of code, or what is trying to happen with a lot of this code. And ChatGPT is also extremely good at describing things if I don't understand, or if I need help with things. But one of the things that I'm doing here also is trying to come at this whole project from a non-programmer's perspective. That's the main goal. So again, the main goal is not just to write a quick application, not trying to necessarily see how fast I can program something with ChatGPT. Really more of, can a non-programmer start to create something like this from knowing almost nothing to very little. So a lot of the things that I'm going to be doing, even though I might know the answer, I want to try to shy away from me and my programming experience helping too much. At the same time, like I said, I don't really have any Python experience, and my depth of programming has been a while back. So is a lot of things that I'm kind of new to. And certainly I'm new to blockchain programming and multiplayer games and stuff like that. So a lot of the concepts here anyway are indeed kind of new to me. So very interesting. Then, of course, we've got some of the Socket.io stuff um, for getting the connection, making that permanent connection, disconnecting from the server, taking a move, and then updating the player location information, updating the player information. Um, New game, not part of the original code from version 0.0.1. I think what this is about right here, although I haven't really looked at it a lot, is when a new player jumps in, I think it's going to try to start a new game, and it's going to be loading up a bunch or initializing players and the gold positions and that kind of stuff, and then sending some of that information to the player's client to actually render out all that. Pretty sure that this is going away or going to be changed today, is what we're probably going to look at. Player joined. Again, I think that this is a little bit going to be updated. I think I have new versions of something like this now, or maybe we're going to modify this today. Players left the game, get random positions, which is not going to happen anymore. Started at a default location for every new player, and then after that, it should be stored in the database. And then every time the player rejoins, we should be getting those And then finally, initializing the main code here. Start off on map ID number 1, and we want to load the map and run the Socket.io software. All right, so that is server. Take a look at the client. So got some HTML and some CSS stuff separated out into different files. So here's our JavaScript. Got some stuff to do MetaMask or do our MetaMask connections, event listeners. And this is what I've worked on the most for the past, I guess, 2 days. So it's going to be the most complete and fleshed out. And I think it completely works. So, well, let's see. We've got all the stuff to listen for events, MetaMask. If we change accounts or if we're logging out from MetaMask, we want to make sure if we're connected game or not. We are want to update the prompts or the notifications on the web page. So I, programmer, can at least see if we got this level of functionality. Also, something else that reminds me of with all of these comments, I'm trying to have ChatGPT go overboard with the number of comments, even though for the most part, I can read and understand what a lot of this code is doing. I really want to go overboard with the comments, help non-programmers. And again, main goal of this whole project, see if a non-programmer can, or how far they can get with this type of thing. So there's a lot of comments. In fact, I'm asking specifically ChatGPT to go overboard with the comments, as y'all will see when I start to get in there, work with it. So if we've got a MetaMask connection, then we want to check to see if we have an account already, set that to be the player ID. Do have one, great. We can do a login, what we saw from the server. And then if we don't, then of course, we don't have a login. And finally, just say no. So the next part of this is for game display stuff here. So what we want is a function to draw the map on the screen. This is part of what I'm going to be working on today. I think we're kind of at this part in the programming where we've got some good connectivity with MetaMask. Once we've done that, we should be having the new player injected into the database. We've already got the map into the database. And so we want to have the server send the client back the map, which I was thinking last night. I think I'm going to do it slightly different way because I think at this moment, the entire 30 by 30 map is being sent back every time that the player moves, I think, which we don't need to do in this case since should have a persistent connection to the server with Socket.io. Shouldn't need to be sending entire map back and forth all the time. Maybe just things like different player location. Anytime other players move around. My thinking, like I said, first web-based multiplayer game that I've ever created myself. So, and first time I've ever used something like Socket.io. I'm not really sure how all that's going to go quite yet. Also, kind of interesting. Let's see. And then, of course, once we draw the map, should be able to draw the player. Here, of course, we get our socket with Socket.io connecting to the server. And then I think for some reason, this bit of code is almost doubled up. At least I see code here talking about checking to see if MetaMask is installed or not, which is something that we've already done. section of the code up there. So this might be duplicated code. Certainly disconnecting. I'm not sure this is duplicate or if we need it in this part of the code as well. Exploring that today. We're getting the player ID, which should be the wallet address. Then we are getting that information from the server, map data, which actually right now, the map data actually includes a little bit more, like the player's X and Y position and the gold. I don't think ultimately that's what we want to do. We want to be able to specify things like map data, something else, and only get map data. And then player data and other things, want to be able to use socket on. I think that's how we're using that. If we have key presses, then we want to send movement directions that be up to the server to check to see if the player can actually move in a certain direction, and then update the X and Y location for the player, and then send the new information back to the player. Think ChatGPT at first said that, or suggested that the movement information should be done on the client side. And I had a nice little talk with it the other day, part of why I'm doing the recording and the streaming, because after having a chat with it about what would be the best way to do things, it did finally agree with me that having player XY positions be managed on the server side is much better for security, so we don't have players trying to manipulate the game. I think that's probably what we want to be doing. We don't want players to be sending the server whatever XY coordinates that they want, right? All right. So anyway, that is the main bulk of code as we have it. So this is going to be just maybe a very long, perhaps boring stream to some people. I knock around a little bit and just kind of think about how we want to do this. So let's hop over to our ChatGPT screen and see of where I left off last night. So I said the map isn't being drawn on the screen, and I was having some kind of issue with some kind of on connect thing yesterday. I think got that resolved. The last thing before I stopped for the night, trying to get the map drawn on the screen. I think that's where we're at. So let's see what it says. There could be several reasons why the map isn't being drawn on the screen. Here are some things to check. Is a draw map function being called? That's a good question. And add console log message statement at the beginning of our function. If it is being called, canvas being created properly. Being created properly. But again, we'll have to double check that. This is the first time that I'm going to look at that code that ChatGPT has come up with. Check that the ID attribute of the canvas matches the one in the draw map. Now that is very likely to be a problem because, like I said, I've been doing this for the last 4 days. Hey, 9878. Yeah, interesting stream title indeed. Yeah. Creating a Web3 based MMORPG using ChatGPT and very little of my own skills. Good to see you too, man. See you. I don't know how interesting this stream will be to you, but if you want to hang out with us, then please do. Let's see. All right, so it's very likely that because of the piecemeal nature that I've been working with ChatGPT, and the fact that ChatGPT seems to like hallucinate often, that it's very likely that from one instance to another, it has forgotten some of the IDs that it might have used the first time it generated some code. And then when I generated some follow-up code or some other functions, it might have used a different um, uh, attribute for an ID for the canvas. So that could be possible, although I think it's okay. Consider its authors. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Is the size of the canvas element correct? Check the width and height attributes to make sure the size of the map match the size is being drawn. I don't think that that's an issue at the moment. We are sticking with a 30 by 30 map. I think that's going to be fine, but certainly I'll keep that in mind. Map being passed correctly to draw map function, that I don't even know what that looks like right now. Like I said, I have not looked at the draw map functions at all before today. So I know that we've got one, as it was very crudely designed by ChatGPT at the first iteration, but I haven't looked at it at all. And so uh, we're definitely going to see. Hey, Sergeant Philly Nasty, great to see you here, man. We are doing we're deep dive into ChatGPT creating a Web3 RPG MMO. So if you're here for that, hang out with us. If not, this is going to really be a very detailed programming stream probably for the next couple of days. So I will not be, feelings will not be hurt if not your cup of tea, but if you want to hang out, that's what we're going to be doing. Let's see. We want to check that the data is being passed correctly from the client to the server. That's being passed to the draw map function correctly in the format that function is going to need. That is something that definitely needs to be looked at. Is the fill style being set correctly in draw map function? That I don't know either. Check that the colors are being used for the different styles. That I think I'm not very familiar with the fill style function itself, so I'll even have to check into that. I have created a couple of other games. This was one that I did. It's kind of like a FK thing where we can move the arrow keys around this map. And this is maybe even a little bit further start than the where we're at right now. But this is the next step in the game that I'm putting together right now, where we cannot move through the tree or the blockade. In this game, we're supposed to be able to pick up the gold, but as you can see, it's not picking up the gold. But we are able to move our little avatar around the map. And that's kind of the next stage for the Web3 MMORPG that we're putting together right now. Although this little thing, game one, I've got up here, is not Web3 and it's not an MMO. It's just a single player game on a map. So the new thing is new iteration of the game being Web3 and MMO multiplayer. We've had to take a step back from progress here to make sure that it is Web3 and multiplayer. However, yeah, it's going to be a JavaScript app rather than Java, and it's using Python on the back end. But anyway, this is kind of what we want it to look like next. And right now it looks like this, where we can see that we are connected with MetaMask. And I've got this blank map right here. So, so this is what we're going to be working on today. We're going to try to get a Web3 the map drawing aspects set up for this new iteration of the game. Okay. Yeah, gears are turning. Absolutely. Yeah, I can see this is going to take a long time to do. So, like I said, if you're want to hang out here and chat with me in the background, and feel free. This probably be many, many days of a lot of heavy programming stream. But if, like I said, if it's not your cup of tea, won't be offended. are welcome to drop in and out whenever you want to. All right, let's see. Is the position of the player being updated correctly? I don't even care about that at this very moment. I just want to see a map drawn in the box. I think that's the first thing. And actually, to be honest with you, when I went to bed last night, I'm not even sure if a brand new player connecting with MetaMask is even getting inserted into the database properly. So I think that's probably going to be the first thing that I want to check this morning, just to verify that we're getting the new player, once they connect with MetaMask, new player getting entered into the database. Ultimately, by the way, guys, for those of you that are kind of into Web3 stuff, ultimately, I would not want to be using a database server on a centralized server at all. My ultimate goal for this is to be all Web3 to the point where, and decentralized to the point where the game is not controlled by any person or entity. Ultimately, I think decisions will be run by a DAO. I want to have a decentralized organization going to agree or vote on changes and upgrades to it. And so it can be almost an autonomous, self-living thing. And I think that the future of gaming probably will have a lot of that. I think that's something that a lot of people want, where I've been involved, or I've been player in playing a couple of games where the company has been in charge of what to do with the game. In fact, even doing things like um, taking the game offline. I loved a game called Lord of Ultima a while back, many years ago, and I thought it was doing it really well. They had tens or hundreds of thousands of players playing on a regular basis, paying money for the game also. But at some point, they decided to not run the game anymore. Now, there is a spin-off of that called uh, Gods of something. I forget. And it doesn't really matter right now. I don't want to take a sidestep into that. But it is a spin-off of the same type of thing. It's almost exactly the same game, but it's created by, I think, another group of people. I don't think it's open source, but it's created by another group of people that in the community have a lot of passion or had a lot of passion for that game. And ultimately, that's what I would like for this game, nor as the other games, is that a company isn't going to own some of these games, but user base will. The user base, maybe with voting power, be able to direct where they want their game to be going, this game that they're passionate about. And they're not at the whim of some gaming company deciding what or what not to do with the game. So anyway, don't mean to be sidetracked with that. Let's see. Learning says, don't know if you saw my recent DFK helper promo. I used AI to help write the script for the promo. Oh, awesome. That's amazing, Sergeant. I definitely want to check that out. Kind of scary to think about how spot on the verbiage was on the first go around. Took a little cleanup. Yeah, I've noticed that ChatGPT isn't always perfect in everything it does yet, I will say. But I am really surprised. 97A says, Umahu sounds like a name of a Chinese lake. Yeah. So I guess I'm pronouncing it Timumahu, which to me also sounds kind of either uh, Aztec, maybe. But of course, Chinese also possibly. Reminds me more of like an Aztec Timumahu, kind of an Indian thing. And I think one of the things, of course, it really just stands for tiny multiplayer. Back to that. Tiny multiplayer maze hunt game. What it is. But I'm calling it Timumahu. Hey, Eric's here. How are you doing? AI is much better salesman. Absolutely, Sergeant. I think AI is going to be a whole lot better at a lot of these things. All right, let's continue on and try to make some progress here. That was one of the things I was curious about, if I could stream and work at the same time, since I lived in and engage in chat so much. We need to make some programming progress here. So we'll see how well I do. Let's see. So we need to check the position, if the player position is being updated properly. Don't think that's the problem, because I don't even care about player position quite at the moment. Are there any errors in the console? We can check some of the messages over on the console and see. Don't think there are, but we can check. Anyway, let's hop over there real quick. Let's turn on the inspection. And then I see that there are some messages here indeed. It's talking about a refusal for the socket connection, because I think the server is not running right at the back off. So I should be able to turn on the server just by running Python 3 Timumahu and then the file ups. Wow. So I just made a change this morning talking about the config file. Not going to like that. Tell you what, again, this is all about ChatGPT. Trying to see if ChatGPT can answer all of these questions. Main goal. So, I'm getting this error. And again, my main goal is not to write a program the fastest. My main goal is to see if a non-programmer can get the help that they need from ChatGPT. Is it powerful enough to get someone who knows probably almost no programming skills? And I found, to be honest, to cut to the chase, for those of you all that just want a quick answer, the answer is no. ChatGPT has misdirected me several times. ChatGPT has done things not correctly. It's given me bad information a number of times that if I really was a non-programmer, then I think I would have been stopped at some of those places. So short answer, no, ChatGPT is not quite there yet for a complete noob at programming to do something, right? Fortunately, I'm not a complete noob, but so I'm able to work past those. But that's the that's the too long didn't read. So anyway, let's see how far we can get with this. The error messages suggest that the syntax error on line 15. Oh, let's see here. Timu Mahu 987 says Rock World. Yeah, it's going to be kind of like our own game here. Adept creative choices. Yes, I think that is good too. Also, it really does very good at some programming stuff. I mean, in a way, it saved me a lot of time with the mundane coding of certain things. So that's been really good. I haven't actually had to code much of anything myself. Uh, but I have needed to direct it and redirect it and redirect it a couple of times, which is pretty annoying. In fact, it was kind of funny. If y'all want to be here for the drama, there was some drama yesterday. I wasn't streaming it, of course, but there was some drama where it was really being silly with something, and I forget now. And I was actually arguing, like, why are you telling me that this is true when you just told me, two phrases earlier that the answer was something different? And I think I was telling it, don't show me the code. It started to spit out a bunch of new code for me. And I said, stop showing me the code. Why do you keep showing me the code? And it just continued to just show me the code that I didn't really want to see at the time. I was trying to understand why it was doing something. I said, I don't want to see the code for a fix. I want to understand. I want you to tell me why you're making these choices that you're making. Don't apologize and say, I'm sorry, here's the new code that works. Tell me why you made the mistake. And anyway, it was quite entertaining. If y'all want some game show drama. uh, so anyway, let's see if we can get past this error right here. Let's see. So we've got this thing here. Sounds like a real person. Yeah, I've been trying to treat it a little bit like a real person. Sometimes even saying, please show me this or please show me that or can you do this? Um, Not really sure why I'm doing that necessarily. Maybe to feel like haven't lost my humanity altogether. When I do interact with humans, I still say please and you. Would you? All right. Anyway, let's get on with this. The error message pointing to this line. Yep, I'm familiar with that line. This is what I worked on this morning. The line seems to have a syntax error because of use of that in the modules. Statement, the dot dot syntax is used to move up directory in the file system hierarchy. However, it is not valid syntax in the module import statement. Modify this line, correctly reference the get database connection to do it that way. If config py is in a different directory, you should modify the from statement to include, I thought that's what I did. Is that what I did? If config py is in a different directory, you should modify the from statement to include the correct relative or absolute path. I thought that's what I did. So what is correct tax? Import the function from config.py if it in the parent directory. And again, one of my main goals here is to see if a non-programmer asking human questions like this can get the answers that we need. All right, so apparently we can, but we need to do this other thing. To import functions from a module on a parent directory, we can use sysmodule to add parent directory Python path environment variable. Then you can import the module. Here's the code. So you're just going to copy and paste that. I need to figure out. Been working on 2 screens now for a lot of this. I don't not sure how easy this is going to be for me to do while I'm streaming and trying to get everything on one screen, but we're going to see how to do it. So I'm going to edit the Mahou and up here, I'm going to paste in the code. Then we're going to import this. I'm going to set the path that add grandparents directory really to the Python path. And we're going to use the from statement properly get output that we need. Okay, so let's see if that works. And we're going to start our server, try to anyway. Hey, look at that. It works. So, very cool. So our server started. Again, we're using Socket.io and something called Flask. I've not heard of before. And it looks like we've got some good stuff going. We've got a client connected. I wonder if one of y'all is connected. Somebody out there who's watching me right now, are y'all connecting to it also? Kind of interesting. Used to work in Flask, good framework. Oh, 9A7A, that's awesome. Glad to hear that. My very first time working with Flask. I know nothing about it, which actually kind of goes along with the fact that I'm pretending to be a total non-programmer. In some aspects, the languages that I'm working with, I haven't ever used before. So it's almost like I'm not even pretending, but it is actually true that I haven't programmed in a lot of the technologies that I'm using for this. So it's interesting, sure. All right, let's minimize that for a second. All right, so here's what we're doing. Electronics, I believe in you. Thank you, D-Electronics. I am so happy to see you. It's been a long time. I'm glad to have you here. Tell me what you're up to recently also. Okay, so let's see. Web3 MMORPG from scratch through ChatGPT. So let's want to come over to this. Actually, let's close out this window right here. Also, and we want to come over here and we're going to go to game 4. So rock 808/game 4. I don't expect that y'all are going to jump in and do anything. Yeah, I miss you too, man. Yeah. We're going to, right now, I'm really heavily focused on this, Web3 MMORPG with ChatGPT. In fact, I'm really obsessed with ChatGPT right now, but eventually I will get back to, Sandbox and a bunch of other stuff down the road. And I think that's what you were most interested in. But yeah, having a lot of fun with a bunch of different things today. You say, been playing with ChatGPT 4 as well, and actually have a class where I need to do some stuff in Solidity. Oh my goodness. So we're going to be doing Solidity stuff in our game as well. So that's kind of cool that when you say class, are you taking a class or teaching a class? I've been watching some of your other videos and this is perfect. Oh, awesome. This is really what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be learning about Solidity. We're going to be making smart contracts. We're going to be creating this Web3 MMORPG blockchain game. We're going to be creating new tokens for the game and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just started a master's, still working. Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. So one of my main goals, I think you probably just stepped in, so you might not have heard. My main goal for this project right now is not to necessarily write the game. I do want to write the game, but the main goal is really to have ChatGPT write all of the game if possible. I don't want to write a single line of code myself. Ultimately, the goal. I want ChatGPT to write it all. But of course, I'm going to be directing it with what I want it to do in human English language, right? And then, of course, as I've mentioned a few minutes ago, I've already found that ChatGPT does not do a perfect job at that. I've needed to direct it more than I wanted to as far as um, programming logic. It hasn't gotten a lot of things correct or what I would say is correct. I've had to guide it down the path of logic and game logic quite a bit more than I wanted to. But I mean, at least we're having fun with this, and at least it's making some progress. And I think we've got uh, several hundred lines of code written already. So, in fact, I'm kind of curious right now. How many lines of code do we have? Let's exit out of this. let's do a word count for Timumahu. That. So there's 400 lines of code in there. There's that binging. Is that binging all screen as well? I might have to stop that sound because that's going to be very annoying if y'all have to hear that all day. There's 159 lines of code there, and then there's a couple of other. There's an HTML file which is pretty short, and there is a CSS file which I won't really include. So I don't know, about 600 lines of code, approaching anyway. Right, code is not the most efficient. Yeah, it's doesn't do too bad at some things, but man, it hallucinates so much, and I don't know if that's what you're finding also, but for me, it hallucinates so much that something else that I'm really loving about what I'm finding out and discovering is how to interact with it. I think that's one of the most advantageous things that I'm discovering right now is how to interact with ChatGPT in such a way that as a programmer, I get the output that I want. And one thing that I've found, I'm not sure if you've learned this yet or not, but maybe this will be something helpful to you if you haven't learned this already. Probably have, but I've found that it's most helpful to paste either the entire bit of code that I already have written back into a lot of these prompts. Like I say, in fact, let me find an example from when I did that last time, just so you can see. But I tried to give it the complete. So here's something where I've pasted in all this code, right? And so let's find the prompt back up here. I told it to do. All right. So I said, now that we have the login function set in the server py and it sends back the data, and then I give it the data that it's sending back in the format. What do we need to do on the client side in play.js to render the map and show the player on the map board? But this is actually what I want. So rather than just ask that question, now what do we need to do? I give it a bunch of extra stuff. I remind it that we've already got this. I remind it what the data it's getting back from the server in the format. And then here's the current code for the client side. And I give the HTML for it. I give the CSS for it in case it needs stuff from that. And I give it the JavaScript. And I give it all the entire code immediately in the prompt, along with the prompt that I really want to know. And I feel that I'm getting much better results than just hoping that it remembers in the right context from what we had. Yeah. So D Electronics says 1,000 times better result. Yeah, I totally agree. So yeah, and I'm very specific about a lot of things as well. Of course, I'm getting some really good answers. So here's an answer that we got in from Login when I was creating that. So I'm also found that I want to do it modularly. I think right now, since you and I both know that we get very small bits of code back from ChatGPT, that the most valuable way for me to interact with it, I've found, is to do things like have it written very modularly. So in a lot of functions, and then work with the larger piece of code, just like one function at a time or something like that, like, or maybe a set of functions, but very small little bit. And then that way it doesn't, because I found that ChatGPT in general, before I started doing this, would try to spit out the entire code for the entire program every single time that I was prompting. And anytime it needed to make a change, it would say, oh, here's the entire program all again. And the amount of output that we were getting would not fill up. I mean, it would extend past what it could normally output in one go. And we have to say continue or pick up where you left off. and that's not good. So I found that writing short functions at a time is probably the best way to do it, which makes sense because I think that's a better way to program anyway, is modularly and functions that do things. So anyway, this is what I was doing here. And so here I'm talking about, or tell you what, here's another example of me asking for this. And again, I'm giving it all this code for it to give me an answer for, and you'll see how good of an answer this is. So here's a really good way that I'm asking it or prompting it to do something. Look at how detailed I am with this. I'll read it off here. Below is the current server PY code. I ask, how can I write the login player ID function? So I give it the exact function with the way that I'm going to call it, passing in the player ID. How can I write this function that will take a player ID passed in from the PS or play.js client, check to see if the player already exists in the database. If not, it will add the player to the database, starting with default player values. If the player doesn't exist, or if the player does exist, it will read the player data and the current player values. Once we have the current player values, the map ID, the player is currently what map ID they're in, player XY positions in the gold, then we can pull the map data from the map tiles table in the database and send the client the map data needed to render and display the map, along with the map's name from the maps table and the amount of gold the player has. And then I ask, am I missing anything else? Because this is something else that I found very useful when dealing with ChatGPT is we want to ask, do you think I'm missing anything else? Do you have anything else you need to write that login function code? Because sometimes I've noticed that it tries to hallucinate or imagine things. And so I've found that oftentimes I want to ask it, do you have everything you need? Or are there things missing? Because maybe I've left out something in my own prompt that I didn't think of, that it will remember and say, oh yeah, I still need this or I still need that. And so I want it to ask me rather than just start to hallucinate new parts of code that I don't want. And then I say, do you remember all the database table names and their descriptions and fields? It should remember that because we just had that conversation a few prompts earlier. So I think I'm not going to pass it that information this time, but I just want to make sure. And if it doesn't remember, I'm hoping that it'll say, yeah, I don't know what those are. So then I say, here's the current server code. If you need any other information, please ask. And when you write the code for us, the login function, please, as always, use a lot of code comments that help a non-programmer understand each step of the code. So then I give it all of the code we've got for the server so far, right? To help it jog its memory of everything that we're currently doing. So with that massively huge prompt and all that information, I got this back out, which was actually pretty dang good. This is to implement the login function. We can use the following steps. We want to call the check player existence player ID function, which we wrote yesterday, function to check to see if the player exists in the player's database. If the player does not exist, we want to call the create player ID function to create the new player and have the default values in the player database. If the player does exist, we want to read those from the player. We want to get the map ID, the player's position, X and Y position. We want to load the map from the map tiles table and send all of that to the client, which that is exactly the step that we need. Part of the problem that I'm seeing is I needed to give it a very detailed set of instructions, which I think I was able to do because I'm a programmer and I have those programming skills already. So I know a little bit more about what needs to be done in some logical steps. If I wasn't a programmer at all, then I think that this would be a lot more challenging, right? For brand new people. So, although I could ask it, it might just take longer, but I could probably ask ChatGPT, give me, in fact, I think I did one time, is I asked for some pseudocode first, just so I could see if it had the right breakdown of the order on how to do things. knew that internally, and I used that. And then, of course, we have the code. So then we have the code where it actually writes the code for me. We've got the login. Again, a lot of comments in there. We have lots of comments in with the code. Check to see if the player exists. If not, create the player. Make the connection to the database. Query X and Y positions if we don't have a player. Well, I think if we don't have a player, we're adding, there's default values in the database that already add that. And that's also done in the create player function itself. And then finally, we're going to read the map ID position variables, the amount of gold, and make that connection to the database, and then emit or send back all of that to the client. And then, of course, it fills in a little bit more about what I need to do. And actually, that was really good output right there. So I was able to use that. Let's see. The Electronic says, my tip would be that I also started getting ChatGPT to write the input prompt as well. Oh, interesting. It's a complicated idea. Yeah. I have had ChatGPT, have asked it to write an input prompt for a couple of different things, a different topic. I didn't really think to get it to write its input prompt here for this, but that is true. In fact, I've seen a YouTube video tutorial think about that as well, and I thought that was a really good idea. Yeah. Or just refining the prompt. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's get back to what we're doing. But yeah, that's absolutely true. Making sure that you write a good prompt is really important. Okay. So I think we've got this new code in place. It looks like our server is up and running now. Right? We've got the server in Flask. It's running. And then we should be able to, I'm going to press enter a bunch of times here to get a blank space. I should be able to come to the login screen here for the rock808.com/game04 page, which should be our first introduction. We're going to click on play the game. I'm already connected to MetaMask. If I wasn't connected, it would have a little connection button. And since I am already connected, and notice it says my player ID is 0, which is not true. So it's already doing something a little bit weird with some code that I think that it had created from the original version 001 draft from a couple of days ago. So now this is the point where we're at to try to write this new code and get that player ID, which is really supposed to be the wallet ID, right? So every player ID in a Web3 game, I think we want to identify players by their wallet address. So that's what we're going to need to look at. See, from MetaMask, I'm expecting to see this 5EC address for my Timu Mahu wallet that I've got specifically for this game. And that's what I'm hoping to see right here. So let's find out why we're not getting the right wallet address. Let's also check the database to see if the original login prompt actually saved the player data into the database properly, because I don't think I've even looked at that yet. So that was the last thing I was doing before I went to bed last night. I want to double check that before we go any further. Did the login actually work? Are we recording the player information properly? Let's see. Electron says, so what are you doing over the inspection window? Are you hacking ChatGPT? I did hack ChatGPT a little bit. Not anything terribly crazy, but I don't know if you've noticed, but when you're in, so over here, you'll notice that I've got a couple of different projects that I'm working on. And many of these start with a 3 or a 4, right? I think you know that we can get access to ChatGPT 4 by paying. Of course, I'm paying. I think you said you're doing ChatGPT 4 stuff also, so I think you're probably paying also the $20 a month. But I think you also know in that case that we have a limited number of chat interactions with uh, ChatGPT version 4, right? And I think it's 25 interactions every 3 hours. And so I don't want to waste those. And so what I've done for each of my projects, like Timu Mahu, or there's a DFK Crusaders that I'm working on, or Galactic Assault, or murder mystery stuff for my mom. And so what I've got is I've got a 3 if this is a chat session built or that's has a chat GPT 3.5 in the background, or it's starting off with a 4, of course, if it's got GPT 4. So I can easily see for Timu Mahu, I've got I don't need the extra power from ChatGPT 4. Most of the work that I'm doing is going to be done in ChatGPT 3.5, where it is not only faster, but also I've got unlimited prompts, right? And so I can interact there. If there's something that seems to be very complex for 3.5, not be able to handle very well, then I'll go into my version 4 for the same topic and ask it, again, fill in all of the background detail information that it needs, pass in all of the updated script information, and then ask my prompt here. But hopefully that way I won't need to be asking so much. Now, what I'm getting at is I don't know if you've ever run out of prompts in your ChatGPT 4 session or not, but I did one time. And if you uh, if you or when you run out of ChatGPT 4 prompts in the amount of time, it'll say, "Hey, you've got an option to. I'll answer this question, but you're going to have to get knocked down to a ChatGPT 3.5 response. Do you accept that or not?" And so people are saying, yes, that they'll accept that, like I did. I said, well, okay, I'll be able to ask my GPT-4 question again in, I think it was 10 more minutes I had to wait, but I didn't want to wait. So I just said, all right, for now, do chat GPT-3. But when I said yes to that, it permanently kept me back down at ChatGPT 3.5 even after the time expired. I even went to sleep that previous night, woke up the next day, and that chat session was still working with ChatGPT 3.5, right? Terrible. So I did a web search and I looked at if other people were having the same issue. And apparently, right now, it is an issue. A whole bunch of people are having that same problem. And the easiest way for a lot of people has been to just copy and paste their entire history back into a new chat now in version 4. And I could have done that, but I had like 2 days worth of chat stuff. And I was like, no way I want to paste all of that in. And so I looked around for other solutions and I found one, hacking ChatGPT. So if we look in the inspect window over here and we drill down, I think it's in this first little part right here where we can uh, scroll down to here, maybe. We drill down here and drill down into the first one again, first one again, first one again, first one again, and I think we're getting somewhere. First one again. Here we go, right here. So uh, had to drill down a lot, but ultimately it says model is default GPT 3.5. What I did is I right clicked on that, I edited it as HTML, and I went and I changed that to GPT-4. I took out all of this. I'm not going to do it right now because I don't want to do it on this. This is one I want to be ChatGPT 3.5. But I took out all of this so it only had GPT-4. The only thing left in here. And then I clicked out of it, and that changed it back to ChatGPT 4. Now, I will say that if you're not paying for ChatGPT, I'm sure it's not going to let you do that. And if you've run out of your prompts, then I'm pretty sure it's still not going to let you do that. So I'm not trying to like illegally get around something, but in that particular case, my time had expired, and I didn't accidentally, I purposefully clicked to go to ChatGPT 3.5, expecting that it would automatically bring me back to 4 later on. But when it didn't, I used this little hack right here to get it back on track with ChatGPT 4. So if you ever run into that problem, then you could make that change. Again, you're paying for ChatGPT 4, and so you should have access to that. However, I will say that for myself, I never ever plan to click a button again to go from a ChatGPT 4 session degraded to a ChatGPT 3.5. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to wait until my my allotment time comes back up. Yeah, it is very helpful. Again, I would not recommend using this as a common solution. Just don't click the button to drop down. You're not going to have a fun time. Let's see. Anyway, getting back to our code here. So what we want to do is we're realizing that our game saying that we're player ID 0, and that's not true. So we want to first or next verify in the database. Tell you what, I'm gonna, if I can change some petty things, see if I can stop that bell, make a bell, no bell sound. If that fixes it. You're all hearing the bell when I do something like this. Rather, I don't care too much about it myself, but I don't want that to be annoying for all. Hear it now. Let's see. So I've got buddy window over here. I pulled it over. I exit. Change set over here. Right. Bell done, please. There we go. Hello. Sort of lost audio. Is it all gone? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Off and on, you say. Back in. Okay. Good. All right. You're good. Thank you. Okay. So what we want to do now that annoying bell is gone is I need to check the database. The last thing I was doing last night is trying to add a new player to the database when we connect with MetaMask. So let's check that. Want to show tables? Let's just do that first since I haven't shown the tables yet. So we've got a couple of tables. We've got map tiles, maps, and players. And if y'all haven't seen yet, since this is the first video I'm doing, first thing that we'll do, I guess, is describe maps so y'all can see what that looks like in case you're interested. So the maps just has very basic, has a map ID. Every map is going to be a 30 by 30 square map. And it's going to have a name, like a zone, you could say. And so what my idea is for this game, it's going to be where the players can expand the map or the world as you play. And what I'm thinking about doing, this is a vision for this type of game that I've had since I was a kid, was that top level players, like maybe mages, like high level mages or something like that, would be able to use magic to expand the world in like whatever direction they wanted. So the map really wouldn't be a square. It wouldn't be so many tiles across and so many tiles tall. But if a player wanted to like tunnel through something and make a windy little path off in a different direction, it wouldn't need to necessarily expand the entire X and Y directions for the entire map, which would ultimately make a massively huge set of data for that, like tens of thousands of tiles by tens of thousands of tiles for just a little bit of extra. It's hard for me to explain in words, but if I drew it out, it might make a little bit more sense. But anyway, the idea is that the game is going to be able to be expanded, or the map is going to be expanded in by zones, and these zones are going to be 30 tiles by 30 tiles at a time. And I want the players to be able to ultimately expand the map in whatever directions they want to expand it in. And that's going to be also based on some level of authority in the game, whether it's a long-time player, or you've got a certain amount of skill, or you've been voted in at like some kind of a tier in the game where you have access to that. So not every single player in the game is going to be able to have that ability, but certain players will. So we need a zone or a name for the map, and then we're going to have the map ID numbers. And we've got describe map tiles. And so the map tiles, it's going to have an ID. So every tile, I guess, is going to have, again, if we're dealing with a 30 by 30 tile map, then generally it's going to be a 900 tile map general. And so we're going to have ID numbers for each of those 900 tiles in the given map ID. And then we're going to have X and Y coordinates that talk about that. And then we have a terrain type. And right now, just to start off, I'm thinking about grass, water, and mountains are three different types that we might want to start off with for terrain types. And then we have something called entity. So on each of those map coordinates, we could have nothing. We could have a player, a monster, some kind of item, a gold, or a wall to block the player. And actually, gold and wall are probably types of items. But at the time that I first was creating this, I was thinking about just having the player and gold and walls on the map, and didn't really think about expanding it into other types of items. And so I just kind of took whatever ChatGPT said and kind of just copied and pasted it in there to create this table. And we can always make adjustments later. As part of something else that I'm doing with this game is I don't really have a fully complete idea of exactly how the game is going to be. I've got kind of a vague idea. And then we're just going to kind of go with the flow. And make changes as we go, which actually is probably not a great idea in the long term, because that way, or because of that, we might be doing things like this where we've got something being implemented right now that will change over time. And then there might be fragments that get left where we started down some different path and then later on we changed in the middle of things to take a different direction. And that might leave fragments or maybe some kind of ghost code of functions or assets or something that we're not really using anymore. So I need to be really careful about that. Again, it's not a really great way to program, but that's just what we're doing right now. Okay, so let's see. There's our maps tiles. And then if we describe players, describe player what? Oh, okay. So if we describe the players table, we can see that we've got a player ID, which should be their wallet address as a primary key. And then the map ID number that the player currently walking or moving in, their X and Y position in that map. If they die, which I've kind of thought ahead about, what happens if you are killed. I'm not even sure that that's going to be a thing quite yet, but it sounds like it might be fun. And we need a reset location. And right now that reset location is just map 1, tile 20X and 20Y. Start off with. And then how much gold does the player have in possession? The name of the player. So we can have something like Rock 808 or D Electronics or 9A7A, something more human readable than the player ID number, which is a wallet address. And then are they active or not? Are they actively playing the game right at this moment or not? True or false? Because if they are, then we want to render them on the map. And if not, then we don't want to render them on the map. That is kind of where we're at now. So let's do this. Let's say select star from players. Or let's just say select star from players. So that is what I was not wanting to see. So it looks like I didn't quite complete my goal yesterday before bed. And it's that I wanted, when we logged into MetaMask, I wanted the new player to be inserted into the database. It looks like that did not happen. Electronics says working and lurking. Absolutely. Learning as well. Cool. All right, let's see here. Very multitaskable. Absolutely. I think ChatGPT can help us to get more done also, maybe. So maybe we'll even become more multitaskable than we already are with that, which will be all right. Let's see here. So if don't have the player getting inserted into the database, prize. Huh. All right. Well, I mean, it is what it is. Trona says, I decided to go back to school at the perfect time. Yeah, I think this is a really good time to do some learning. Getting a master's also is an awesome goal. Congratulations on that. All right. So I thought we had gotten past the point where we are inserting the player into the database, but apparently not. So what we need to do is let's edit our server script again. Come down to, oops. Down to the login prompt or the login function. And let's just double check what we've got going on here. If not, check player existence. So we're checking. If that's not true, we need to create the new player. Failed to create player. So we're using create player, passing in the player ID. Create the player. All right. Function. All right. If the player exists, then the player already exists. Otherwise, map ID starts off to be map number 1, 2020 location, a map reset location, which should probably be a string based on the map ID, position X and Y. Right now it's just hard-coded to 1 2020, but that's fine. New players will start off with 0 gold, have a default name of player. It is something that we'll want to change pretty soon. We want to give human players the ability to set their character names kind of right off the bat. And of course, if they're logging in for the first time, if they're creating a new account, then of course they are active right at that moment. So we're starting off their active flag to be true. So then we need to insert that into the database. So we make a connection to the database. At a cursor, we create a query, insert into players, those values, and execute the query, close the database connection, say it has been created. So that's not working. What? Let's see if this is going to it's getting logged to the printing out. That's the question, right? Let's come back to our game. Get the server started again. I think the server's off right at the moment. Started the server. And let's reset, recycle all of that. Recycle again. Player ID number 2, player ID number 3. So for one, I don't think that should be happening for a couple of reasons. So it looks like we're getting off on some old code from an original spin of this that I don't really want to be following anymore. So you get a message here connected to the server. We get a message received, player ID 3. Need more messages, I think, to help in the debugging process. I don't know what this is right here. DevTools failed to load source map. Reference error module is not defined. Something. I don't think that's anything I'm doing. Okay, so let's see. Need more better logging. So as we look through here, every time I'm connecting, I get client connected, which makes sense. If I'm refreshing the page, but I'm not seeing enough information. Ultimately, it means need more. Take a look. Received player. And the server. I don't think that that's going to be in the client side, but we're going to check clients. All right, and we are doing a console log for that. It's actually fine. So get into player side of things. And here we've got received player ID. We're getting that from a socket on interaction. Our player ID element that's being displayed onto the web page right there. So find out how we can get on our function. Right. Oh, connect server. Okay. All right. Interesting. I want to do a little bit more logging in the main mass section. If I can follow. Don't really want to. I want to do this programming myself. I'd rather ChatGPT do all of it, but I have a feeling it's not be good at what I'm about to try to do. We want to do to help us follow everything that we're doing from this point on is every time we start a new function, probably want to do a console logging. So we can kind of follow the flow. And then we can do something in function, whatever. Want all of our functions. And that way, kind of follow that. So we'll start asking ChatGPT to do that for us from this point on, I think. But for right now, here we have a draw map. And we have got, that's it. Then we also have all these socket on. And for each of those socket ons, I would also say we really want to be in console logging for those two. Because every time we've got some kind of communication between the client and the server, we want to recognize that some kind of activity is happening. Got it. Let's just search for on. So we've got a console log for the server, connect, player ID, app data. And also, if we look closer at this, yeah, and that's something else too about ChatGPT and working with it is for the last day or two, because most of what I was doing is working in small snippets of code, and I was trying not to do any coding myself. Very interesting for me to be working like this because not really very familiar with what the code is doing. A lot of what I was doing is just copying and pasting. Again, I'm trying to be more like a non-programmer, and I'm finding that as the code is getting a little bit bigger, that I think that's going to cause a lot more problems. And the reason is because um, if there is an issue or a problem or an error or something to debug, I'm not as familiar as I normally am with the places and what's going on in that code. I would know, oh, here's where I need to go and fix it, or here's something that I need to do. Like right at this moment, I have no idea what the names of all of our functions are, even because uh, I let ChatGPT kind of come up with some default names for some functions and some other things to start off with. So as I start to poke around in here a little bit more, it's very difficult for me. But again, the idea is that ChatGPT should be doing most of the coding. I'm planning to copy and paste the code that we already have. And my idea is that as a non-programmer, somebody it might not even matter that they don't know what's in their code, right? ChatGPT supposedly should handle all of it. All right, let's see here. What's happening is we're getting connected with MetaMask. These are all we get a element status for MetaMask. This code right here is outside of a function. We have an event listener. When we're clicking, we're getting the information about the account. We're appending the connect button. Then we're handling that when we click the button. Do we have an interesting thing? I think even before we connect with MetaMask, though, and before we connect with MetaMask, we have a socket connection. So it's looking for a socket connection, or then let's start the server up here. So we do. We've got player ID 0, which is totally not correct. We are connected to the server. Is that what we want? If you're not logged into MetaMask, you even want to allow the player to be matter. Doesn't really. All right. So if that's true, then I think see what the error message. Quick. Waiting for wallet request permission. So yeah, MetaMask is giving us a prompt to try to connect. We're gonna ignore for the moment. So Socket.io says we're connected to the server. Not sure we really want that. I think what we want to do, drop interactions. You're not connected yet. Tell you what, let's just ask ChatGPT on program. Say, what would be best from a game design? Do we want player able connect to server, or they connect data mask? What are the cons? Don't think want any game interaction. No player does their wallet. Reason to allow them to server for connecting your wallet. To see what, from a game design perspective, it would be likely best to require the player to connect their MetaMask wallet before allowing them to interact with the game server. Part of one thing, as a side note that I'll pass along to anyone watching, is sometimes it's very difficult for me to understand if in my prompt I gave leading questions that then allowed ChatGPT to hallucinate an answer that it feels I was leading towards. And so sometimes when I read something like this, it makes me wonder if the reason it's answering this way is only because it thinks that's what I want to hear. Anyway, I just thought I'd point that out. That is one problem that I want y'all to be aware of, and something that I have found with ChatGPT, or at least I'm suspicious of, is that based on the questions and the prompt that I give it, I'm getting a vague feeling occasionally that its answers are hallucinated and lean towards what it thinks that I want to hear. So just be aware of that in your own workings, right? So personally, I would agree with this, is that I don't think that we want players to interact with the server until they connect the wallet. I can't think of any reason right off the top of my head. This is because the game likely depends on Ethereum network and the player's account on that network functioning properly. So allowing them to connect to the server before connecting their wallet results in unexpected behaviors. I think I agree with that. I can't think of any reason why we would want to connect in any kind of way to the server until we have like an account ID, like the player ID number, which is their wallet address. And that helps to keep the player's account unique to themselves, right? All wallet addresses should be unique to the player. And if you're playing the game, I don't see any way or any reason that you'd need to interact with the game without a character account, which need to be added to the database, and which means that you're going to need to have your wallet in there. So, but that's part of why I'm asking this prompt, is maybe ChatGPT could give me some additional insight that I'm not thinking about as to why we might want to allow a player to interact before. But it doesn't seem that ChatGPT is agreeing with me on this. Pros of requiring the player to connect their wallet before interacting with the game include ensuring that the game can properly interact with the Ethereum network. Yep. So want to make sure, I mean, if we're a blockchain game, we want to make sure that they've got MetaMask or something installed and that they have a wallet address. That's not, someone isn't trying to play who doesn't even have a wallet. Preventing errors or unexpected behavior that could result from trying to interact with the game server without a connected wallet. Right. Like, I don't know if someone could try to manipulate the gameplay in some kind of way. And if you're not a valid player, in other words, if you don't even have a wallet address that's connected, and we wouldn't want any interaction from those people potentially playing the game. 987A sounds like a dubious dating relationship. I'm telling you, man. It's I've had some very interesting encounters with ChatGPT so far that have made me feel that it is like interacting with a somewhat dysfunctional human in a couple of different ways. So yeah. I don't know if that's just me anthropomorphizing this chat bot, if you want to just call it that, or what the deal is, but it certainly feels that way sometimes. Let's see, making it clear to the player that they need to connect their wallet to participate in the game. That's a given. You're going to have to connect your wallet to play in the game. not going to be any way to play the game without being in Web3. The cons of requiring the player to connect their wallet before interacting with the game include potentially increasing the barrier to entry. Well, I don't care about that. This is a Web3 game. You need a wallet. As players need to set up MetaMask wallet and connect, that's going to be a requirement. Potentially frustrating players who may not understand why they can't interact with the game server until they connect their wallet. Well, again, this is obviously going to be a Web3 game. So I don't think that those cons really matter too much. So we really want to do here is say, let's change the code so that a player does not connect to the server. I'm just going to add, just to remind it a little bit, via Socket.io. Does not connect to the server until after they have connected their MetaMask wallet. Here is the current play.js already have. What changes do we need to make so that the IO and connect code doesn't get run after have a MetaMask connection? And again, we're going to do again, always these the document your code want on programmer follow along with each up. Or you go code to any information of any question, what we are asked. And so again, one thing that you might recognize here is I'm really talking to it like almost like a junior admin programmer, right? As a human. Maybe almost even as a child that doesn't fully understand a lot of things. I need to be very specific with it. What I'm finding is most helpful. Because I need to ask in so much detail, and because I need to give it such a detailed prompt, that's why I'm also reminding it before you show any code, if you need more information or have questions, I want it to understand. I think I've found that it's better to work with ChatGPT in this way. I want it to understand that I don't want it to be hallucinating, right? I don't want it to be making stuff up off the top of its head if it doesn't have the answers that it needs, or if it doesn't have exact stuff. Sometimes we want that, right? Like if we want ChatGPT to be creative and come up with something new or fanciful ways of doing things, or just being creative, we want it to come up with ideas and suggestions and just run with it. But in some of these cases, we don't want it just making things up, especially in the middle of a program when we're trying to change a bunch of stuff where we already have got a lot of code written. So in this particular case, what I want to do is I'm going to display the full JavaScript that we've got here. And I'm going to copy and paste it all in all the current code that I've already got. Into ChatGPT here as well. So I'm giving it its prompt. I'm giving all the context, copying, pasting the client part of the code, which has to do with the connection. And let's just see what it says here. Delay connecting to the server via Socket.io until after the player is connected to MetaMask wallet. We will move the Socket.io connection code into the then portion block, the MetaMask connection code. Of course, makes sense. This way, the Socket.io connection code will be only executed if the player successfully connected their MetaMask. See, here's another great example of why I'm saying here in chat on this stream, we're not trying to write code necessarily as fast as possible. Certainly, anyone who's done any coding would know right off the bat, based on what I was saying earlier, of course, you want to move the connection code inside the logic that doesn't get executed until after MetaMask connects. But my goal here with this is not to write a fast game. My goal here mostly is to see, given text prompts in ChatGPT, write that code without me really having to do much of any coding myself. And like I said, it's been a struggle. In fact, as you can see, or as you will see if you haven't already, as we're starting to do this, the prompts that I'm writing are so intricate that in a way it would be quicker for me just to write the code or make the changes myself without trying to come up with a prompt that specifically says how to do it, right? I think most everyone's heard the expression, sometimes it's faster for a person to do it themselves than to tell someone else how to do it. And in a way, I feel like ChatGPT is the same way. It'd be easier, quicker for me just to make those changes. But that's not the goal for what we're doing here. Ultimately, something else that I feel I'm personally getting out of this is I'm learning how to interact with ChatGPT better, more effectively, to get the answers that I want. And I'm hoping that what that will mean is, as ChatGPT gets better at understanding or doing things, then I will also be getting better at ChatGPT and how to interact with it, in that I might be ahead of the game a little bit as far as how to get better prompts. I feel that one of the future jobs, if you want to call it that, is working with AI. And I feel that the people that understand how to work with it, maybe like prompt engineering, I'm starting to hear it tossed around quite a bit. Prompt engineering might be one of the new jobs that's highly sought after. In fact, I think I saw on Google like $300,000 salary asked for high level prompt engineer, annual $300,000 salary for that. Crazy. The prompt engineers are already getting $300,000 for job offering. Crazy. Let's see. 9070 says, I've heard that it gives you interesting answers if you ask it about what it wants to be when it grows up, but not exactly in those words. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, there have been other streams that I've done in the past where we just kind of have random conversations with it. And I'm hoping to do more of that in the future. Burp, hey, how are you doing? Great to see you here. We're working on a Web3 MMORPG written mostly by ChatGPT. What we're doing here today. Welcome to hang out, although I will say that it's going to be a very slog through the mud type of stream. So if you want to hang out, feel free. Otherwise, not offended. Those people that aren't really interested in that. C97A says, sure makes an interesting office mate. It does. I do think that definitely is an interesting office mate. So anyway, it's given us some code here, and notice how much it's given us. It's given us this huge amount. In fact, notice it cuts off, and this is what I don't like for it to do a lot of times. We try to get too much output from it, and that's why I like to keep things rather modular. Then it spits out a bunch of code, but then as you can see down here, it just stopped in the middle of what it was doing. Const tile equals stops. So I can't wait until we have a bigger model that allows us to put in more. I could say something like continue. Please continue. Pick up where you left off. Something like that is feel the most effective way to see here. It's going to start the whole thing over again. This is where I get a little bit frustrated with it sometimes. Please continue, pick up where you left off. And of course, it starts the whole thing, which of course means it's not going to finish, not going to get to the entire thing, right? Let's see. First, I'd give you some alpha. I'm using ChatGPT a lot. Search for Flux by Paradigm. You mean like do a Google search for that? That sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I've not kind of just getting into ChatGPT and working with it. Is this your company? Maybe click on this. Want that necessarily. This is something you're using. Like we can put in our OpenAI key, which I think I have because I've got the paid version. And then it looks like we have access to something here. Interesting. Yeah, I don't want to jump into that right at this moment, but it looks like something I might be interested in. Can you give me like just a little background for it? It looks like I could even maybe move stuff around. Maybe it would like a visual designer. You can plug things into this visual representation and create links to different things and have it do something based on a visual context. So you get your OpenAI key, then you can prompt times 3. Um, yeah, I don't want to try to learn this new thing right here at the moment, but definitely it looks interesting. I will grab that. Um, I will grab that later. Uh, this is a tool that you're using. I'll take a look a little bit later. Definitely, this is kind of visual representation. Might spend a little bit of time learning about that. Very cool. Thanks. All right. So again, here we've got it stop, and then I'm going to say continue. See if gonna. All right. So notice that I've got display game stuff here. Then when I say continue, it starts somewhere a little different. So again, not exactly sure what I can copy and paste. It makes it a little hard to just copy and paste when it's not the entire code. All right, but let's see what it says down here first. The updated code, we wrap socket.io code, then the else block of the handle accounts changed function is called after successful MetaMask connection. Now the socket connection is only established after the player connects his MetaMask wallet. Additionally, we added event listeners for the player ID and map data events to receive data from the server after the player is logged in, which I think we want anyway. Also, I need to look at the code a little bit closer. Like I said, I've had ChatGPT write this, like some basic ideas for some code, and I just copied pasted and I didn't look at it too carefully. Today, of course, that's what we're going to be doing, is we're going to be looking at that a little bit more carefully. And I think what I want to do, and we'll query ChatGPT about this ourselves rather than making assumptions or using a lot of our own programming skills. We're going to try to really query ChatGPT a lot and pretend that we're a very noob type of programmer. And I think what we want to do is we probably want to use these functions only when we needed updated map content or updated player information. But we're going to see about that. Finally, we updated the accounts handling change function, also admit the login event to the server with the player ID after a successful MetaMask connection. Okay, so that is stuff that I would have said also, right? Those are things that I would have done myself. However, are we going to be able to just copy and paste? Let me pull this up, and I'm going to move off to my other screen. So give me for not all this stuff up on the same screen at the same time. Let me edit. There's JavaScript stuff. And I'm going to quickly look this over just to kind of see, is this what we want? Ferg says, by the way, it's less visual, it's more productive. You ask something once and it gives you three outputs every time. I see. So when you say three outputs, I guess like you're getting three alternative responses, like three different ways something could be done. Like let's say I asked for a poem about the moon. You're saying it's going to give me three different poems about the moon, and then I can kind of pick the one that I think's the best. If I'm doing programming like this, I guess what you're saying is it's going to give me three different ways to solve the programming task. And then I'm going to have to look over each of those three ways. I could see how that potentially be a little bit better. I also feel that that would take a little bit longer to analyze some of the differences between three sets of code. Very similar. But I can definitely see an advantage. There might be a few different methods to solve something, and you want to visualize a couple of different ideas and pick the best one. So yeah, that could be useful. All right, let's see here. I'm going to compare what it's trying to do here. Bring this over here. Yeah. So one of the problems that I'm finding with ChatGPT and doing coding is when it spits out a whole bunch of code, sometimes I'm not sure if it is changing things on me that I don't expect. And so I'm finding that spending a decent amount of time comparing what it's telling me to have and what I do already have. Right? But let's just run through this real quick. So we are going to have a MetaMask status. We're going to have a connect button. Right here as well. Connect with MetaMask. Got our listener. Looks like we've got that on both. Got our Ethereum request. Accounts change, catch the errors, and so on. I'm going to add the connection button to right here. Well, function to handle account changes. So this is where I think the changes are going to be. Oftentimes also I've given ChatGPT very specific instructions to supposedly just show me the changes. And it's not been able to comply with that very well. Like it'll still continue to show me all of the output for the entire file, even though I'm asking for just the lines that have changed. So I still need to get better at what kind of prompting I need to give it to get only those changes. And sometimes I need the context, like a few lines above and below, to see where it's wanting me to put certain lines or what to change. And so I've needed to ask, show me a few lines above and below. And again, it still gives me the entire script of output, which I don't want. Let's see. So here we've got our function to handle change accounts, which you see right over here. We're going to log that. We check to see if we've got some kind of account length coming back from MetaMask. And if we don't, then we're going to show the connect button. Otherwise, and here's where we're going to have the differences right in here, I think. So MetaMask is connected. And if MetaMask is connected, we're going to give a yes. We're going to hide that connect button. And here, MetaMask is connected. Then that's what we want right here. Let's see. Ferb says, I prefer using Visual Studio Code for code stuff if you're familiar with it. Yes, I have been using that a little bit. The problem that I'm having with it right at the moment, I do like it, is that I haven't found a way, and I'll be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time to figure this out. I'm sure it can probably do what I'm looking for here, but I haven't found a way that it can instantly or easily upload my the files that I'm working with directly to the server hosted on the internet right now. So I can write the code locally on my local machine, but my local machine is not running the game server and having the open port that we need 40 or 4808. And I don't think I have a full version of Python and all of the different add-ins installed on my own PC here at the house. And I ran into some problems trying to do that. So I was trying to install Python. I was trying to install one or two other things, some modules that I needed for, I think, like Socket.io and some other stuff. And I was having some issues with some version compatibility problems. And because of that, I didn't want to mess with it anymore. And I said, well, I want to check this out and I want to be multiplayer anyway. And I don't want multiple people connecting to my machine at the house. So I may as well just write this on the remote server that already has internet access and all this kind of stuff. So I think what I would like to do is use Visual Studio Code, but I need to find the way that when I write the changes to the file, it immediately uploads it to the server or allows me to change the files on the server right away. So then when I'm testing it and trying to debug it, it's really debugging from the server. And I haven't taken the time to look into that yet. All right, so here's where our changes are. So MetaMask is connected, and that's where we've got this right here. So we say yes, going to hide the connect button. And that is exactly, so here we have the new code implemented. If we're connected, the socket is already connected. We need to commit the player ID. Let's say player ID. So login is going to be our function that's going to make sure that we are logged into the server. That also includes creating the account if we don't have the account created. That should be fine. However, I really want to do here, I think I need to add a console log in here as well. Go ahead and make a change to our code. Again, I really want to be doing as much of this as possible with ChatGPT, but for this right now, I feel like really tricky. So here we've got the connect button style display. Here we've got the connect button style display. And then we end with our two closing curly braces, which should be these two closing curly braces right here. So ultimately what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste that bit of code, those lines. And we'll do a Control C to copy. And then I'm going to paste those right into here. And why it's giving me, started doing this not too long ago, converting all of this to comments, which so fortunately something else is going on here where I'm having to manually change that I don't, but it is giving us lots of good code. I mean, lots of good comments. Need to figure out why it's commenting out all these lines rather than just pasting it in. That is definitely slowing me down some. Uh-oh. Thinking probably I'm off a little bit with my quotes. Oh, no, I'm not. This, by the way, what I'm doing right now, exactly one of the reasons that I would prefer to be using Visual Studio Code to help format and align curly braces and all that stuff a little bit easier than doing it manually. All right, there we go. So here's what we've got. If MetaMask is connected, we're going to hide the button. And then we're going to say, if we have a socket connected already, then set the player ID to be the accounts. That should be coming from MetaMask, which is the wallet address. And then we're going to emit or send to the server. We're going to be trying to interact with the login function. And we're going to be sending the player ID, which is the wallet address, to log in with that wallet address. So, and then if we're not connected with the socket yet, then we are going to make a connection and say connected to the server. And then set the player ID also. Interesting. We're going to be setting the player ID no matter what. Why are we doing it inside this if statement? Why not do it before we even get to this if statement one time? Let's see. And then we're still hold on, this is interesting. We're still doing the same thing. Socket emit login. I don't think it understands. I don't think ChatGPT understood the difference there. If we have a socket already, do we need to do a login again? And whether we do or not, we're getting the wallet address and we're running the login function either way. I don't think that's really what we want to be doing, but that's what we got from ChatGPT. So we're going to run it and we're going to find out if that is okay, if that is okay or not. What I'm going to do here, though, I'm going to do a console log right here, and I'm going to say MetaMask is connected. Okay. To see if we even get into this part of the code, which I'm sure we will. But then we also want connected to server new, as opposed to this one is connected to server already. Okay, so I don't think that ChatGPT really gave us some good output for that. We're gonna run it in a minute. We're gonna see, but it looks like we're doing pretty much the same thing, whether we have a socket connection or not already. So we'll have to see how that goes, and then we can tell ChatGPT, or we can ask ChatGPT to update that based on what we see. Again, trying to think of it coming from a non-programmer's perspective. They might not understand too much about the fact that we're doing pretty much the same thing here. Or I shouldn't say pretty much, we're doing exactly the same thing for each of these cases. So what's likely to happen for a non-programmer If they don't understand the code, they're just going to run it. They're just going to copy and paste and run with it. And then they're going to need to make design changes based on what they see. So we're going to kind of follow that same path and see what happens. All right, so down here, looks like we have the same code. It's a little bit different right in here, it looks. So here in our current active code, we're setting up player ID from accounts, but in the new code, it's telling us take that out. Then we're getting socket connected again. Exactly the stuff that we saw a minute. There's some duplication going on in here. Unless I'm not understanding how this works, which is very likely as well. But why do we even have this piece of code here? If window Ethereum. So in other words, we're connected to MetaMask, which has already been done up here. Then what we're supposedly doing, seeing if we have an account, saying yes. If we have a socket connected, setting that, doing a login. We just did a minute code right in here. I'm just going to delete. I'm looking it over a little more carefully. I don't see any benefit in that. It's very possible that I personally accidentally left in some duplicate code when I was doing a copy and paste from one of the previous days. I was updating some old code with some new code. I was keeping both the old code and new code in the file in our program for a little bit. And maybe I somehow got sidetracked and left in some old code without taking it out. I got to think that that's what that was. All right. So anyway, let's move on past that. So here we have new game display and stuff. And here, see what we got. We're going to draw our map, X and Y positions. I'm just checking my code on the right with the new ChatGPT stuff on the left, just seeing if it's wanting me to make any updates or changes to it. But I don't want to be copying and pasting too blindly, because again, part of what I'm doing right now is seeing if ChatGPT is hallucinating a lot and changing my code along the way, which have feel like I've noticed that a couple of times where when I ask for more information or an update, the next time it replies to me, I get a slightly different answer, right? Just like Ferp was saying a minute ago, where something that they're working on can give 3 different solutions for the same problem or the same prompt. Whenever you ask ChatGPT the same thing multiple times, you might not get exactly the same output every time. So what I'm having to do right now, which does take a lot longer for what I'm doing specifically, is coming at this approach from a non-programmer's perspective. I'm needing to make sure that it's not changing things in our code where we might have some incompatibilities where part of the code is working properly but uses some different variable names, and then ChatGPT hallucinates different variable names to do the same type of thing. Like, let's say instead of the variables position X and position Y, maybe the next time it comes up with code, it has location X and location Y, the same variables. Of course, that would be a problem in our code, right? Let's see, we get a console log, which I think I want to be doing more console logs just to see where we're at and to kind of get an idea myself as to the flow of how we're doing. Those of you that are starting to watch, I have done a bit of programming in the past, but not a lot of multiplayer uh, client server programming. I haven't done a lot of that kind of thing. And so my understanding of how the client server dynamic is going to be working in this particular case, I'm not fully sure I understand how Flask and Socket.io is going to work and interact. And so it's really going to be helpful for us to do these console logs, see how the flow of the functions happen. But again, this is something that I need to realize I'm doing because of the programming skills I do have. And a brand new programmer probably not be thinking to do that kind of thing. Oh, let's see. So we've got a canvas set. 2D tile size is 32. And then we have so this is going to be actually drawing the map, which we still have yet to do. That's one of the things we're going to try to do today. We're getting the map data, which should now be in the format of a two-dimensional array. And it looks like this code, like what ChatGPT is trying to do here is create, I think, some boxes or rectangles with the size of the tiles and then color them gray, white, blue, based on if it's a wall or a land space or a player or a monster or gold or something. Going to color those boxes in different ways. And then we're going to have a green box for the player, which looks like maybe is going to be a circle, perhaps. Arc with radius. Okay. I also am not sure if this is really going to be the best way to do it. If we're trying to think about a multiplayer game where we've got multiple players moving around the map all at once, that really, not sure how that's actually going to. All right, so let's see here. Finally, on the output from ChatGPT, here's some of that same thing. Window Ethereum, MetaMask connectivity, we've already got. So I think this is yet another duplication of that code. All right, so here's our draw map. So why is this socket connection outside of any function that I see? I don't think we want it out here. Hmm. And then again, we've got window Ethereum again, checking to see if we have got a MetaMask connection or not. And then doing kind of the same thing we've already done. where we set the player ID to be the wallet address, catching errors. If you have MetaMask installed, that does don't have a window Ethereum, and you do not have MetaMask installed, and we are not continuing on. I wish I had Visual Studio Code because see my curly braces are not aligned very well. So here we have a bunch of socket on code. And to be honest, all of this is on connect. I think what we've got a little bit more like this. That's a little more accurate. For socket on, connect, we're getting the player ID. Otherwise, we're asking it to call. I think I've already done that earlier. Our code back up here. We're doing MetaMask stuff. Right in here. If MetaMask is connected, then we're going to say if socket connected. I think what we really want to do probably not run const socket IO connect until after MetaMask is connected. So let's ask ChatGPT what the deal is about that, right? So I'm gonna ask it. Let me move that over to screen for a minute. So we have this code. I'll paste the line in there. We have this code. At what point is that code run? A function, or it run as soon as file? And one, if don't want to connect server until after player has connected their actually go. So my thinking is that we probably don't want to do this code except in the instance where we have got a MetaMask connection. But again, we're just going to ask ChatGPT and see what it has to say about that. Here is the complete play.js file as we have now. Again, we want to give it context so it understands a little bit more about all of the pieces of code, and it doesn't forget what all the function names are and what's going on. On the other screen, I'm just getting a copy of that, and we're going to paste it all right. So I always like to give it full context of the code we're working on. Okay, so here it says, this code is run immediately when the play.js file is loaded, which what I thought. To ensure that the socket connection is only established after a player is connected to the MetaMask wallet, we need to move this line of code inside the callback function that's triggered when the player connects their MetaMask wallet. Here's how we can modify the code. And as you can see here again, notice it's giving the full output for the entire JS file, which it's not going to be able to complete. It's going to end up, giving us a little bit and then timing out. So I think not too bad, because at least we did make it all the way down into the display game stuff here. But I don't think we need to look over the whole thing in too much. I think what we really want to look at is right here where we're having the handle accounts changed, and we see MetaMask is connected. We're going to log that it's connected. We're going to hide the button, and there's where we establish the connection. So move it there. What I figured. So then we're going to delete that bit of code right there. I think we can keep all of these socket on, connect and disconnect and player ID. I think we can keep all of that where it's at. Although we might want to, I think we have a section for drawing player stuff. We might want to comment a little bit more clearly that this is a section for socket on activities like connect, disconnect, stuff like that, where we're interacting with the server, the back end. But in the meantime, let's get back up to our MetaMask portion where MetaMask is connected right here. Have the connect button. And then after this, where we're going to move this off to the screen for a moment. And we're just going to copy and paste the lines. Talking about automatically giving me comments. So I think we added that in here. So after our connect button, we say we're establishing the socket connection and making that connection. And then we have if socket is connected, which it should be at that point. We're going to say that we're connected already, which connection. What let's do. Otherwise, if it's not connected, then maybe there was an error or a problem. So the comment here says, if the socket is not yet connected, wait for the connection event. Before doing this. So it tries to run a socket on connect again and maybe again and again, and see how that might be an issue. So what I'm going to do here, get a log. We're just going to put trying connect to the server. Dot. Do it. All right, so what time is it? It's 11:47 my time. I'm going to take a lunch here in about 13 minutes at noon, and we'll drop off the stream for a little bit, and then I'll come back and we'll keep working on it a little bit later. I know this is probably not extremely exciting for most people. Feel free to come and go as you please. Well, let's see. Okay, so we're going to do a console log, trying to connect, and then if we are connected, I don't think we really want to be doing this part of this code here, right? So my thinking is, and again, a programmer already, it's okay for us to try to make that connection once we connect with MetaMask. Once that's done, and this is part of me not necessarily having a lot of my own experience with Web3 and this type of client server programming, but I don't think that we want to continue to come into this function every time trying to get the player information and the login information multiple times. I think that this bit of code right here, this if statement, if connected and if not connected, needs to be moved out of the section for MetaMask, is my thinking. We'll ask ChatGPT about that here in a minute. That's my thinking right now. Let's see where we're at with this. Just see with all the new logging that we've done. How far we're getting with this. So I'm going to restart the server itself. Has started up without any errors. Hop over to this screen here. Close out from that window. All right. So I'm going to refresh this page for game 4, Timu and we're just going to, we should not be connected. I'm going to close out of this window right now. So MetaMask is unengaged at the moment, and we're going to come in as a brand new player, see what we get. So play the game. And let's go to inspect. So here we get some kind of reference errors. The socket not defined. Thing. But of course, we're not connected to MetaMask, so we wouldn't expect socket to be defined. It's line 104, I think. Let's do run that in the background and have that run. Yeah. All right. So let's edit our JavaScript again. Line 104. Here, we're checking socket on connect. It's at this line right here. So maybe all of this socket code does need to be included in a block of code that is only looked at if we have our MetaMask connection. I'm going to hold off on that in just a minute. That's what we might need to do to get around the socket not being defined. Error. See if that's really stopped us from doing a whole lot though. So your player ID is blank because of course we haven't logged in yet. We're going to connect with MetaMask and we're going to see what happens. So obviously it's trying to do something right now. That socket on connect. But it can't get there. So let's connect with MetaMask. I would love to see add some code in. I think I really want to do that with ChatGPT. So, we're trying to do as much of it as we can with ChatGPT. Let's add a kind of code on console log if the player clicks the connect to button. Only show me the times that need to be changed. Not show all the code. Play.jl. See if that solves the issue that I've had in the past for that. Okay. Oh, good. Looks like it worked. Here's a code you can add the console log statement when the player clicks the connect to MetaMask button. So that's exactly what we're just going to copy paste that. Pretty sure. event listener right here. We're going to open up and that right there. And we've got this and everything else looks okay. So let's come back to our start over, play the game. This effect, connect with MetaMask. Player, click to connect to MetaMask. Good, that's what we want to see. So we're going to go ahead and say next. All right. So then we moved to handle accounts changed. MetaMask is connected, trying to connect to server. Yeah, so a lot more of this output, really what I wanted to see. So that's good. Good progress. One of the things that I'm trying to do right now, not only for myself, but maybe for people that might be doing this kind of thing, as new programmers who are using ChatGPT, we want to have enough debugging information that the person who doesn't really know a lot about programming can kind of follow the steps of logic, which I think is going to help them also to see where some potential mistakes might be. So we want to add a lot of console logging messages along the way, maybe even more so than normal, just to help as a guiding programming tool. But I think that's going to be one of my recommendations as well, is just to have a lot of console logging. So what we're doing here is we are now connected. The player ID is still blank. I also see that we're connected to server. I don't know the next thing that's happening. And let's check out what's going on here a little bit more. So once we have that, then we're going to be running the handle accounts changed, which is going to show us that MetaMask is now connected. We're going to try to connect to the server, and then it's not going to be connected already, but instead we need to do a socket on connect. Okay. Actually, this code right here isn't. So we're going to run, going to connect to the server, getting supposedly a player ID number. Then we're running login from the server. Tell you what, let's do right here. Let's another console log and just say ID. Actually, I guess we wanted to use ChatGPT, don't we? That how it tells us. So once the server connect server that player ID let's console.log to play current player ID. What is the code for that? See if it only shows us that little bit of code with just this prompt, or if we're going to have to go to the extent we did last time about only show me this. So let's see what this says. Okay, looks like we got a little bit of stuff here. You can log the player ID in the console using console.log function as shown below. Good. So we have on-socket player ID. That right? The code listens for player ID event, logs the received player ID, and sets not a little bit more detailed than I think we want. Like it's trying to create a whole event around that. Where really we just want this right here, I think. Except for the fact that we're not going to have data part of it. So obviously I did not ask very well. And again, I think it's because ChatGPT really needs a lot of good context. So I think what we want to do is just have to give it the context right here. In fact, let's delete that, the start of that console log line that I was about to do. We really want that console log line to be after this, but let's see if ChatGPT is going to give it to us. Okay. So what we're learning is more context for ChatGPT. Looking at just the following lines of code, how can we display the current player ID using console.log after player ID variable is set? Then we're going to paste in that. Again, I think you wouldn't need a lot of programming skill to be able to do that. Without needing ChatGPT. And I think that's what we got. But still, the idea here is to use ChatGPT for like everything, right? So here we've got our socket, we've got our connected to the server new. We are going to get our player ID, and exactly that is where we wanted to have our console log. And then, of course, emit a login to actually log in with that. So it did give us the answer that we wanted, but we needed to give the snippet of code that we were trying to work around. Right? Now we should be able to come back over here. Refresh this and see what. Connect with main event. I'm surprised. Are we not already connected? I think we are connected. So something might be wrong with our code right now that we're not checking properly if we already connected or. Okay. So here we go through our steps, and now we see the new line right here, which is 5EC, and that is what our address should be, 5EC, right there. However, one thing that I will notice is this has lowercase letters, and I know in general that doesn't really matter for wallet addresses necessarily. However, there are a couple of times when I've tried to use a wallet address with just the lowercase letters, and it has some kind of a checksum in there where it will tell me that it's not a completely valid address. It really needs to conform to a certain specification, I guess, that has the combination of the lowercase and the uppercase letters. And I forget where that is right off the top of my head, where I had a problem or issue with that. But it is interesting right here that this is giving me the lowercase letters, which is not the best way to consistently deal with the wallet address. So that's interesting. All right, so now we have the wallet address. Player ID is still blank right here. We are making a little bit of progress, but it is 12:09. So I'm going to go ahead and jump out for lunch. And if anybody's still here, thanks for hanging out with me. I'm going to be away for maybe an hour, and then we'll get back in and we'll kind of pick up with this again. For anyone who's interested, thanks for hanging out with me, and we will back soon.